Greetings everyone, I'm back like I never left, and thank you for coming to my channel. In this video you'll be learning about exclamatory sentences. But as usual, before we get started, I just wanted to thank you guys for your love and support. Thank you to all of you who have been watching my videos. Thank you to everyone who's been liking my videos, sharing my videos, and just I would like to thank you guys in general for your support. And don't forget, feedback is always welcome, whether that be positive feedback or constructive criticism. I always say negative feedback, but negative feedback sounds kind of harsh. So I would just like to say constructive criticism moving forward. So yeah, feel free to comment and don't be shy. Even if you want to introduce yourself or tell me where you're from or just leave a random comment, we're here to build a community, so let's get to know each other. And I'm sorry about that loud pitched scream in the background, guys. That was my son. And for some reason, every time I'm doing voiceovers for my videos, he just has to have my attention or has to do some crazy random stuff. But don't worry, because you won't hear any more ruckus throughout this video, I promise. Okay, now let's get to the video. Okay, so what are exclamatory sentences? Exclamatory sentences express strong emotions like shock, anger, excitement, and so on. They always need an exclamation mark at the end, and they can be formed by using what and how, and I'll elaborate on that throughout the video. Okay, let's start with shock. And another word for shock is like surprise. Okay, so our first example says, my dog just got hit by a car. And we wouldn't say, my dog just got hit by a car. We would say, my dog just got hit by a car, because we're shocked and surprised. And plus there's an exclamation mark at the end. Our second example says, I just crashed my car. And we wouldn't say, I just crashed my car. We would say, I just crashed my car. Our third example says, I just found out I'm pregnant. Our fourth example says, I can't believe what I'm seeing. And our last example says, you've got to be kidding me. So notice how in each example, I used a surprise voice, or I placed emphasis on what I was saying because I'm shocked. Next we have anger, and another word for anger is upset. So our first example says, you stole my shoes. So we wouldn't say, you stole my shoes. We would say, you stole my shoes, in an angry voice. Our second example says, leave me alone. We wouldn't say, leave me alone. We would say, leave me alone. And then our next example says, get out of my house. And we wouldn't say, get out of my house. We would say, get out of my house, because obviously if you're kicking somebody out of your house, you're upset at them. Like, you're kicking them out for a reason. And our last example says, she stole my parking spot. You wouldn't say, she stole my parking spot. You would say, she stole my parking spot, because you're upset that she stole your parking spot. And what does all of our examples have in common? They all have an exclamation mark at the end. Next, we have excitement. And I would say excitement is similar to happiness. So our first example says, I'm graduating tomorrow. So we wouldn't say, I'm graduating tomorrow. We would say, I'm graduating tomorrow. Our next example says, I got promoted. And our last example says, I won $5,000 at the casino. So what does each of these examples have in common? They all express excitement, and they all have an exclamation mark at the end. Next, we have interjections, and these express sudden emotions or reactions. And there's a lot of interjections. I just included the ones that express like excitement or being surprised. So first we have wow, and then we have ouch, and then we have yay, and then we have oops. Okay, next we have what, and I believe for what we have 3 formulas. So don't panic, guys, because this is a little tricky, but you just need to remember the formulas, and that comes with practice and applying the skills, of course. And to be honest, you really don't need to remember the formulas. You can just look the formulas up. Okay, so our first formula is what plus the adjective plus an uncountable noun or plural noun. So our first example says, what lovely weather. So notice how we have what, and then we have the adjective. Well, actually, this is an adverb. You can do an adjective or an adverb. I just put an adverb here. And then we have weather, which is an uncountable noun. Excuse me. Our next example says, what beautiful kids. Notice how we followed the same formula. What plus an adjective plus a plural noun. And then our last example says, what dirty clothes. So notice how we have what plus the adjective plus the plural noun. Also, I'm sorry guys, I forgot, you're supposed to place emphasis on these. So you would say, what lovely weather, and what beautiful kids, and what dirty clothes. Okay, so here's our second formula with what. We use what plus a or an plus an adjective plus a noun plus the subject plus the verb. I know that sounds like a lot, but once you do it a few times, you'll catch on eventually. Okay, so our first example says, what a sassy daughter you have. So notice how we use what, we used a, we used an adjective, and then our noun is daughter, the subject is you, and the verb is have. Our next example says, what an amazing student you are. So notice how we use what, and then we used an, and then we used our adjective, which is amazing, and then our noun, which is student, our subject, which is you, and our verb, which is are. And for those of you that don't know, adjectives describe nouns. A noun is a person, place, or thing. A subject is a person or thing that's doing the action, and the verb is the action. And our last formula with what is what plus a or an plus the adjective plus a singular countable noun. So our first example says, what an ugly dog. So we have what plus an plus our adjective, which is ugly, and our singular countable noun, which is dog. Our second example says, what an adorable baby. So we have what plus an plus our adjective, which is adorable, plus our singular countable noun, which is baby. This formula is way more simple to me. And our last example says, what a great idea. So we have what plus a plus our adjective, which is great, and then idea, which is our singular countable noun. Next we have how, and I believe we only have two formulas for how. So our first one is how plus an adjective plus the subject plus verb. I feel like the formulas for how are also simple. Okay, our first example says, how tall she is. So we have how plus our adjective, which is tall, and then our subject, which is she, and our verb, which is. Our next example says, how smart they are. And then our last example says, how fascinating he is. So notice how each example follows the formula. And our last formula that we use for how is how plus an adverb plus the subject plus the verb. And adverbs give us more info on verbs, adjectives, and other adverbs. So our first example says, how loudly he screamed. Or better yet, how loudly he screamed. So notice how we have how, and then we have the adverb loudly, and then we have the subject, which is he, and then we have the verb, which is screamed. Our next example says, how beautifully she sang, or better yet, how beautifully she sang. And then our last example says, how quickly he sprinted. So notice how all of these examples follow our formula. Okay guys, that concludes our video. Thank you guys for coming. I hope you guys found this video informative. How did I do? Feel free to leave some feedback. If you did find this video informative, please feel free to like, comment, or subscribe, or all of the above, and I'll see you next time.